Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Geopolitical Review, where I sit down with leading academics and experts to discuss the forces shaping geopolitics today. As always, this project is supported by the Democratic Security Institute, a non-partisan think tank dedicated to advancing peace, democracy, human rights, and conflict resolution. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Sheila Paylan, an international human rights lawyer, former legal advisor to the United Nations, and a leading advocate for accountability, justice, and the protection of human rights in conflict zones around the world. Throughout her career, Sheila has worked extensively on issues ranging from international criminal law and war crimes investigation, genocide prevention, and the enforcement of international humanitarian law. With over 20 years' experience advancing accountability and survivor justice in conflict and post-conflict settings, her work has placed her at the forefront of some of the most pressing legal and moral challenges facing the international community today. Now she advises NGOs, think tanks and governments on human rights and peace building. At a time when conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and elsewhere continue to raise profound questions about the effectiveness of international institutions and the future of the rules-based international order, her insights are more relevant than ever. Policymakers and citizens alike are grappling with a fundamental question: how can the international community uphold human rights in an increasingly divided world? So, thank you for joining me this morning. I wanted to start off by asking what first drew you to international human rights or human rights law. Was there anything in particular that convinced you that this was the field that you wanted to work in?
Yeah, definitely. I knew very early on that this was, human rights, sort of accountability and justice issues were very near and dear to my heart as a descendant of Armenian genocide survivors. And I'd say when I was, I understood, like I learned about the Armenian genocide when I was 11, but I think when I was 17 and I came to Armenia for the first time, it just really hit me. And it was like a formative time in my life. I ended up studying psychology first because I was more concerned, like, why do people do these terrible things, you know? And after doing that for a while, then I wanted to kind of do something about it. And so I went to law school and I wanted nothing to do with any type of law other than human rights, international criminal, which is a terrible thing for a person to go through because there's all this other law you have to take, which is fine in the end. But yeah, I knew really early on, and it was formed by the stories I'd heard about the things that had happened to my family. And it always just gave me a sense of curiosity. Like, I remember when I was 14, 15, like there was the Rwandan genocide going on, there was the Balkan Wars, and I just thought, oh, this is still happening, you know? It's not something that happened a long time ago. These things still happen. And then I ended up joining the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda straight out of law school. And I thought that was a really interesting full circle moment because I got to work on the very issues that really brought me to law school anyway in the first place.
So where, if you don't mind me asking, where were you born and raised before you went to Armenia?
I was born and raised in Montreal, Canada. My parents had just immigrated there from Turkey, Armenians from Turkey, which is not very usual. And so, yeah, I was born I was the first person born in my family outside of our historic homeland, apparently. Yeah. That's what they like to say.
Just based on what you just said about kind of the history of the Armenian genocide and also your first degree in psychology, I find it super interesting how kind of intergenerational trauma shapes national identity or shapes communities or diasporic communities as well. How important do you think that event is for Armenian national identity?
I mean, it's huge. But there's a difference between Armenian diasporan identity and Armenian national identity within the state of Armenia. There's a difference. And that difference is growing. Obviously, I mean, there are descendants, many descendants of genocide survivors here in Armenia, but most of them ended up in the diaspora. And I think that, I mean, while it's still, there's a genocide memorial here and everything, the issue is not as pressing. Obviously, it happened a really, really long time ago, and we have bigger, like I live in Armenia now, so more pressing problems at the moment that cannot afford to have our full attention on something like the Armenian genocide. Whereas in the diaspora, it's like this search for recognition continues, and I think that's a very valid endeavor. But so long as it doesn't override, like, yes, I think it's inevitably and unfortunately a very important part of our significant part of our identity. I would say unfortunately because there's so much more to our identity than that, and I guess it's like a negativity bias or something. But because we never had justice, it's hard to let go, and it's kind of like a curse or burden that's passed on inadvertently from generation to generation. Like I know my parents certainly never wanted me to be that obsessed with it or something. I wasn't obsessed with it like that. They were like, just have fun, enjoy your life. I'm like, what are you talking about? We have to do something about this. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Um, from what I've read about you as well, like you focus quite a lot on like accountability processes. What role do you think that plays, like with what you're talking about in the kind of negativity bias of the Armenian diaspora? How recognition of the Armenian genocide or the non-recognition of it has contributed to peace, or well, negative peace rather than positive peace, and how that's shaped relationships today?
That's a huge question. And I mean, as an accountability expert or junkie, if you will, like I think the fact that we never had it made us focus on it, and the wound festers, and we're dealing with a country that isn't just not recognizing it but actively denying it, the perpetrator country that's like it's really, the injustice has compounded in that sense, and it unfortunately infects the way Armenians see a lot of the world, and the fight with Azerbaijan over territory, and over just existentially everything was fueled more because nothing was done about what had happened in the past. So I think it's like, I can't answer that question entirely right now. Obviously, the link is essential. And I would say, I wish that we could get to a place that we didn't have to fight for recognition anymore. And I used to think that, like, it's okay. We know what happened. Everyone knows what happened. We don't need, but the thing is now there's backlash. And if you don't keep it alive, because we don't have a solid, like, the way the Rwandan genocide does, had a whole court set up by the UN. You can it's so hard. It's almost atrocious to deny it. People still do. People deny the Holocaust. Like, it's absurd. But it's not that hard to deny the Armenian genocide because we haven't had that level of recognition and that kind of officialization of it to the level that would have made us feel like a little bit less stressed about it.
Yeah.
So I think that while some even Armenians would argue, let it go, I'm like, actually, maybe we shouldn't right now, because people will flip it, the story will change it. There will be revisions, and I'm not okay with that. But
So
it's
do you
not
think
right
only
now.
through legal processes or accountability processes can you avoid this kind of the possibility of people rewriting that history? Like only through the legal system can it be recognized and
No,
resolved, but
quasi-legal maybe, but there has to be a level of acknowledgement,
yeah.
especially from, if it should be an undeniable fact, and that comes by mainly by the perpetrator admitting it. So if they said, yes, that happened, of course nobody in Turkey did that right now, nobody alive, so nobody's at fault. If they were like, yeah, we apologize for something our great ancestors did a long time ago, that would help a lot. or if there was sufficient recognition, that it would be like a fact of common knowledge. And I find that it is, but it's not just through legal processes. It's also through academia. It's also through diplomatic relations. It's not only, yeah.
And just because you just mentioned the Rwandan genocide as well, I was just wondering why you think it's so difficult for the international community to do anything preemptively or to do anything during a lot of the time that mass atrocities are happening, and how it's always afterwards that they go, oh yeah, nobody knew it was happening the whole time, but we're only going to intervene after.
Oh,
Like,
well, they don't even intervene after.
yeah.
So sorry, but there are many cases. There are many cases, obviously, that don't even see the intervention after. During, it's, nobody wants to, everyone hopes things will go away and there's so much going on at the same time. But it's not necessarily true that there are no interventions. Obviously, after we've seen like post ex post facto accountability, during there are examples of interventions during that don't necessarily amount to the results that we hoped. And before, if intervention before leads to before an atrocity occurs, you don't see the atrocity.
Yeah.
So it's a negative that it's hard to find evidence of, but there are a lot of preventative measures and efforts that go on, and probably result in things we don't see, like the lack of atrocities. And that comes with initiatives like legal reform and setting up institutions and stuff. Like, the world is not as violent as it used to be, much as it seems to be so violent, but human rights have made a difference in the quality of the lives of everyone in the world. It doesn't mean that people aren't suffering. Obviously they are, but it used to be way worse. So it's working. Again, we have a negativity bias and we're focusing on all the crap, all the
Yeah.
bad, all the nightmare.
I I do obviously 1000% agree that human rights have, and especially the legal system around human rights have been a net positive. But I feel recently, maybe this is my negativity bias, but that recently you have seen that legitimacy crisis around international institutions, around international law and things like that. What do you think is causing that? This is such a huge question. And how do we reassert the legitimacy of human rights on a global level, but also on an individual level as well, I suppose.
Human rights are legitimate. There's no legitimacy problem. There's an efficiency problem. There's an enforcement problem. You know, I get a lot of cynicism from people of saying, do human rights even matter? Does international law even matter anymore? If it didn't matter, why are perpetrator states like calling it in? They're perverting it. They're still referencing it. They're still saying, oh, our rights were violated, so we're acting in self-defense. Meanwhile, that's projection and you flipped it. No, you were the aggressor state, but they're using the language of international law and human rights and what have you to play the victim or to defend themselves and stuff. No one is saying human rights don't matter. None of those, we're saying it doesn't matter, or not me, because like those who are saying it doesn't matter are just sort of exasperated with are expecting human rights to do something it's not capable of doing on its own. It's people. Like, human rights is a nebulous thing. It's a concept. It's a topic. It's an idea written down on a piece of paper that we all declared at some point in time we were going to respect. Now, those who don't respect are not being held to account. Not enough, and so that's a people problem. And there's nothing wrong with the law per se. I think that one of the main issues is we don't hold our leaders responsible for their actions, and we don't feel connected anymore to anything beyond our immediate circle. So it's really hard for someone in, I don't know, I'm going to say anything, Kentucky, to care about what's going on in Sudan. They might see it, but they're more like, well. someone else is going to take care of it, you know, and that's very normal in terms of like psychology. I think part of the problem is most people don't care anymore. They just let the like they care about other things, and it's up to international leaders. I don't know. I think we have to try. Now I'm going to ramble, so I think I have to stop. Like there's so many ideas running through my head right now. It's
No, you're more than welcome to ramble.
no, it just, I mean, there are thought leaders that try to inspire more care in this department. You know, it's just that we're bombarded with information so much every day, and so it's tough. But I haven't lost any hope, and I think I don't like when conversations start from that premise. Like every single person can make a difference if they care. If you don't care, don't complain. I'm not going to ask you to care, but if you don't care, don't complain because you don't care. And if you care and you complain, do something. Get up. You know, like I don't know. There's so much. I'm not going to be able to tell you, but anything, not just talking about it, but
Why do you think? Why do you think there seems to be this gap now, where it seems like people don't care as much about what's happening on the other side of the world? Is it just that there's too much happening to individuals in their own lives, or that they're just overwhelmed by the amount of, or is it
yeah.
like the media and the news and the way that they're portraying it, or
I mean, that's definitely a part of it. I'm sure that there's fatigue, desensitization. It's overwhelming. We are bombarded by too much information at all times. And there is a sense of like, what can I do? What can I do about it? I like to think in terms of quality over quantity. I like to focus on like one thing or three things and make a difference in those things. You know, I cannot do everything, that nobody can, but I also can't do too much. I can just do a little bit and do it really well, and that makes me feel like that's it, I've done my part. And if everyone did a little bit really well, like if you, I don't know, like I think of someone like Kim Kardashian. I'm going to bring her up because I think actually what she does is so cool. Like she finds certain cases that she really cares about and she brings light to those particular cases. And there's a big difference that happens. And that's where you do a little bit, but really well, you know? And of course she has like the kind of platform and fame that would get a lot of eyes on something. But if 100 or 1,000 people felt the same way about a particular case and just did that really well for like maybe a year, oh, that person's life would be changed. Someone who's wrongly incarcerated or what have you, you know. And nobody's really getting away with anything. Nobody gets away with anything in the long run. They might be getting away with it now, but like I don't know. I think of Aliyev, I think of Netanyahu, I think of Putin. Like there will be a day of reckoning for their crimes, you know, and it's just not going to be today, unfortunately, but it'll come.
how do you think, as in terms of what's happening now, as you say, with Aliyev and Netanyahu, Putin, and the others, what should the international system or international institutions be doing now to try and bring that day of reckoning forward, especially, or is there nothing that they can do until?
They're doing it. Look at the ICC, their arrest warrants. They're doing it, and now it's up to like someone to arrest them when they set foot on their land. So the international institutions are actually functioning. The enforcement is the problem.
So does
So,
it ultimately come down to people writing to their politicians or protesting or like some form of public or civil society
I
standing up?
can't. I don't have the key to unlock the big problems of the world. It's
Mhm.
I there are if you care about there being enforcement, yes, I guess you can write to your MPs or something, but you can also bring there. I don't know the answer that would be like the $1 million answer. We just keep. I think the main answer is to try not to get apathetic, be less apathetic, and then brainstorming together. But social media is a very powerful tool. The more people who comment and share and complain and stay focused on something, the more attention it will get. But yeah.
Okay, and then I also wanted to speak about your work with gender based violence or sexual violence. If you could say a little bit, if that's possible, about that part of your career or that part of your life.
Yeah, I worked as a sexual and gender-based violence specialist on a team of experts in the DRC for quite a while. We were investigating, we were helping to train military prosecutors on better investigating war crimes and international crimes. But I was the designated like SGBV specialist, conflict related SGBV specialist. And I think that, it's not so new anymore, but it was maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I mean, it's a fairly new concept to be giving so much attention to rape as a weapon of war, whereas it used to be considered a spoil of war. Like it's just one of those things that happens. And the Rwandan Genocide Tribunal first defined rape as an act of genocide and rape as a crime against humanity. So that started in, what was it, like 90s. But yeah, now it's a really big topic, and I'm glad it is. I think like, do you remember when Nadia Murad and Denis Mukwege won the Nobel Peace Prize? I think that really, the Yazidi, what happened to the Yazidi women through sexual slavery, and the scourge of rape as a weapon of war in Congo, which is like, indescribably horrific. It's not just rape; it's like really bad. It's like there's mutilation and all kinds of horrors involved. Um, it's like impossible to turn away from it. And also, I think generally speaking, women are just getting more, finally rising up and getting more of a voice and more powerful. So they're demanding more. And we have like bodies like UN Women, and gender is becoming much more visible as a perspective that needs to be like a cross-cutting issue in everything, including conflict and peace building. I mean, that's not SGBV, that now I'm spinning, but I mean, research has been done that the more women you have in a peace building process, or as part of a peace agreement, the higher chances it has of sticking. So yeah, it's a part of my life that remains a part of my life. I still do work as a gender expert for certain things. Like,
I wondered, because I just wondered how you managed to remain kind of emotionally stable, I suppose. Like, if you are constantly
that's a big
being.
assumption you're making.
If you're.
What makes you think I stay stable? No.
But just when you're ex- having or getting to listen to these stories from people who have been tortured and abused to such severe extremes, how you cope with that on a personal level.
Well, yeah, that's a really good question, because you have to stay emotionally stable as much as you can. And it is a huge, like, secondary trauma is huge in that situation. So, especially when I was in Congo and I was interviewing victims daily, sometimes women who had just been raped, like days before or something, or weeks before. And it was horrific. But I had been trained to do this. I went through a training, and I knew like I had worked with different kinds of victims before. Like, you don't show your emotion. You show empathy, you show compassion, certainly. You don't just stay like a rock when the wind is falling apart in front of you, or the person, because it's not always women only. But believe me, I would go cry at home at the end of the day, or sometimes right after an interview, once the victim was gone, I would be like, I need a minute.
Yeah.
And I was in regular therapy during that time. It was actually during COVID, so it doesn't matter. I had my therapist online. She was in a different country, and that helped a lot. But there's no denying that. And I always, it's also how you view the women. Like, there were cases where I don't know, there was like one or two cases of women that came back to me and said, you saved my life. I don't know, like, I was like, I no. But no, don't. Like there was like a couple of cases where she was in such a bad state, I had to like take her myself,
Hmm.
an NGO and follow up and like doctor and everything. It was just, and it fell a little bit outside of the scope of my work because I'm just supposed to gather testimony and that's it. So there were some cases where like, and then one woman who got pregnant from her rapist, she came to me pregnant, and she was just like skeletal.
Hmm.
Uh, she came back to me after she'd given birth, and was like, healthy again, and she was happy and she was okay, like relatively, and thanked me a lot. So these were moments where it makes up for so much of the hard parts, where it's all worth it. It's all worth it. But yeah, you have to keep yourself healthy mentally and physically. you know, don't drink too much. Don't, get some sleep. And yeah, having a therapist helped, and having some training to make sure that I knew how to do what I was doing, because there were sometimes you get a curveball, and you're like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. you know? But if you don't do it, I don't know, someone else will, I guess.
In 2025, like, documented cases of sexual violence as like a tactic of war rather than a spoil, like you mentioned, increased dramatically from previous years. Do you think that is just because it's perhaps obviously not in all parts of the world, but it's less taboo or more attention is being paid to it? Or why do you think that is? Or do you think that it is being used more now?
I think you're right about it being less taboo, but I think it's mostly more reporting. It's not that the numbers have gone up, it's that the numbers are coming. Like we're seeing the evidence more. So part of it is perhaps victims or survivors are more like, if there's a sensitization campaign around it, being like, come forward, no one's going to judge you, and anonymity is important and all that, like, you're never supposed to reveal the identity of. So if they trust the institutions that are gathering the evidence, you were getting the more attention that's put on it, the more like people like me who were there to get that evidence 3 years before me, that position didn't exist. So that those numbers wouldn't have come in. I think
So
that's what it.
why do you think that in these parts of the world, trust between people who have undergone traumatic experiences like that and institutions or NGOs or charities that are working in the region, the trust has increased? Is it just time on the ground, time spent with the communities, or do you think it's a bigger idea?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the Congo, for example, MONUSCO, which is the acronym for the peacekeeping mission there, doesn't have a good. I mean, like the local population is unhappy with that operation. It's been there It's the longest standing peacekeeping operation, and in some parts of the country, they're very hostile towards MONUSCO because they feel like they're not doing anything. Like especially in the East, you guys aren't doing anything. You're part of the problem. Whatever, it can be kind of a hazard to be associated with the organization. So where I wasn't in the East. I was in the middle of Congo. We couldn't walk anywhere without like we. I couldn't walk in the street. I had to go in an armored vehicle everywhere, even though it was like, hey, it's right there. Let me walk. I need to walk. But they're like, no. So the thing is, though, I still had. It's the rapport you create with a person, and they will trust you if you are trustworthy. And I mean, so I loved the work that NGOs did, especially in Congo. Like they had less red tape and they could get more done. And I loved working with them because I felt like together we're getting more done faster. Unfortunately, a body like the UN, as important and effective as it could be, also has the bigger an organization, the longer things take.
Mhm.
Okay, it has more money and it has more funding and it has more programming. So it's a very important part of the landscape, and I'm very very proud of having worked with them. So not trying to take away anything there, but the smaller the organization, the more they can just do whatever they want. Kind of like that.
Yeah.
Like, why can't I do that? They're doing it. You have to fill a form. Okay.
Like 400 forms as well. It's never even just one form.
No, but there are more rules, and
Yeah.
I understand. We're not. It's not the same. Ours is well, the UN is an intergovernmental organization, an international organization. A non-governmental, non-profit organization has a different has just the capacity to do things differently, and also doesn't have the capacity to do the sort of things you. So they complement each other.
Yeah. Do you think more attention should be paid to those organisations there,
Which ones? NGOs?
the NGOs?
I mean, I don't think that they lack attention.
As in, I mean, more. Do you think that NGOs are more influential on the ground than the larger organisations? Then,
No, I think that they can do things a little faster sometimes, but we're complementary. It's a
yeah,
complementary, symbiotic relationship, and especially in a place like that, it was like that. That was my experience. That if it were just the UN, there it wouldn't have had the impact that it would have also had with the work that they. And it's the same in government. Government works with civil society. Civil society does different things. You can't have just one or the other.
yeah. Okay, and then I know that we only have a few minutes left, so I've just got a few more questions if that's okay, but these more broad questions. What do you think is one issue in international politics or in human rights specifically, it's up to you, that you think deserves more attention than it gets?
I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess the authoritarianization of it, or the perversion of it. I think people should be really careful to call that out. I guess. And enforcement. Enforcement is a huge, or the lack thereof. For example, European Court of Human Rights judgments that don't get implemented or executed at the national level, even though they're binding and they're supposed to. So then all that happens after that is like expressions of concern and expressions of, I don't know, where's the enforcement?
Yeah.
I think we have some global reckoning here with the lack of enforcement, and I find that it's almost like we've built this system to fail without it. So I just came up with that. No, no. Yeah, I would say let's talk more about how to actually enforce these rules that we claim to be binding.
And if you were speaking to a young person who, I'm still going to call myself young, who believes, who's kind of looking at the world and is quite pessimistic about what it looks like at the moment, what would you point to that would say that the system still matters and it is working, or what they can do personally to kind of do more themselves?
I mean, the system isn't working as well as it could, like I just explained, like 40 plus minutes. But we can't live in a world without it. It just needs to be improved, not thrown, like, what is the expression? The baby with the bathwater. I don't understand
Yeah.
that expression. So, if you care about that, you don't have to like dedicate your whole life to it, but I would say get involved. There's so many ways in which we can all make human rights a part of our lives and a way of life in like small ways. It could either be a cause that not everyone has to try to fix everything. Like it's not that I don't care about the environment. Obviously I do. I don't want to be on a burning planet, even though it's burning, but I don't make climate change my area of expertise. I'm not, I mean, everything kind of overlaps to a certain extent, but my focus has been genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. I, of course, can work in any other area of human rights, or yeah. But someone who makes their cause, like LGBTQ rights or gender equality or health rights or what have you, you're doing your part. And there isn't a single area of, like, there isn't a human right that won't appeal to anyone. Everyone will have one that they would be like, that I care about the most, or these three things I care about. You don't have to dedicate your life to it, but there are every single one of them has an organization. If it doesn't start one, use your voice. And also, the way we live our lives, the way we individually live our lives, should be in line with our values. And you can start there. See if your behavior lines up with what you care about, without it being like, I'm going out there to do something, but something like, are you sure that you're not discriminating against people a little bit? Like, are you being fair?
So maybe check yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, and without being like rude or overly confrontational, there are so many instances in our daily lives where we are confronted with it. At the dinner table, sometimes someone will make a rude remark that's not really super nice, and could have like women don't know how to drive. Like, that's an opportunity right there to be like, excuse me, don't say that. Stuff like that.
My last question then would just be if you have any books that you would recommend that people read, or podcasts, or anything that you would recommend.
I will recommend one book that, because like, I like quality over quantity. I'm not going to give you guys 3 podcasts, 3 books. There's a lot of garbage out there, but there's a lot of great stuff. And the greatest thing I have read in like the last, I'd say, 2 years. I mean, I read it a while ago, but I haven't read anything as good as this. And no, maybe a year. Okay, is called Humankind by Bregman. Now
Okay.
that's going to revive everyone's faith in humanity. Half your questions would have been answered by that.
Yeah, perfect. I'll definitely give that a read then. So, well, thank you so much. I know that you have
Yeah,
to go, so I'll let you go. But thank you so much for your time today.
my great pleasure. Thank you, Grace. You have a great day.
Thank you, you too.